So time is short, so we'll cut quickly to the chase. And I'm asking this question as someone from India. In India, often we say that, we live in a very troubled neighborhood. We do not choose the friends and allies our partners make, our neighbors make.
You do not use...
We do not choose.
The sound is not very clear. You do not choose.
No country has the choice of what friends or allies its neighbor is going to make. And they can be sometimes uncomfortable allies and friends. But we don't go to war over it. Now, what is it that leads Russia into this long, protracted war about NATO expansion?
Well, I assume that the people who assembled here, they are political scientists. They are interested in following the international developments, and if this is the case, then for the last 20-some years, they should have understood the reasons why we are concerned about the Western policy towards Russia very well. Yesterday, I think, the French ambassador to Israel, who was personally participating in the discussions between the Western leaders and Gorbachev, he confirmed that there was a commitment not to expand NATO. And then he added, but this does not mean that Russia is right in what it is doing in Ukraine. But between the lie about not expanding NATO and the events which started 1 year ago, there were so many developments which you cannot overlook. The lies continued, including the lies not about some oral promises, but about some commitments on paper. In OSCE, Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, during a summit in Istanbul in 1999, the political declaration was signed by the presidents and the prime ministers, which said security is indivisible, and the OSCE participants are all committed to equal and indivisible security. Then they stated that each country is free to choose alliances, but in doing so, no country can strive to strengthen its security at the expense of the security of others. And then another principle was signed by the presidents and the prime ministers, according to which no country and no organization in the OSCE region can pretend to dominate militarily. If you read it again, it's clear that NATO violated all these commitments. By the way, it was in 1999, and then it was repeated in 2010 at another OSCE summit in Kazakhstan. And when we started to ask questions, guys, you committed yourself not to increase your security at the expense of our security, can you stop expanding NATO? They said, well, this is just political commitment.
But Minister, what
wait
does
a second. Look, if you ask the question which I'm trying to answer, that means that you don't know what I'm telling you now. So when we said, okay, you said this is political commitment, let's make it a legal commitment, let's put all these principles in a legally binding treaty, indivisible security. You know what they told us? They said, legally binding guarantees of security can only be obtained inside NATO. Just looking into our face. We told them, look, President Obama signed this particular paper. Well, this is political commitment, forget about this. And then there was another legally binding commitment, the resolution of the Security Council, which endorsed the Minsk agreements. It was very, very astonishing that all those who signed the Minsk agreements, except Putin, publicly admitted that they never intended to implement this particular Security Council resolution. So, no delivery on the oral commitments, no delivery on written commitments, no delivery on legally binding commitments. And all this was accompanied by NATO instructors beefing up Ukrainian army, Ukraine getting more and more weapons. As Merkel, Hollande, Poroshenko, and Zelensky said, we needed the Minsk agreements to buy some time to get more and more weapons to Ukraine. And if you can check the reports of OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, they registered sharp increase of the shelling of Donbass just in the beginning of February. 20, 30 times more than the routine exchange of fire before that. So we defended our security, we defended the people, the Russian people, who had been denied by Poroshenko and Zelensky, denied the right to use the Russian language in education, in media, in culture, in everything. If you check the Ukrainian legislation passed after the coup brought to power this neo-Nazist regime, they legally canceled everything what has to do with the Russian language. And when the people who did not accept the coup in the east of Ukraine and in Crimea said, guys, leave us alone, we're not going to follow your policies, they were declared terrorists. And it is the regime who started the war against these people. That's why the Minsk agreements were considered, the way to stop this. And it was not very difficult to implement the Minsk agreements. It was about the special status for a small part of the east of Ukraine, much smaller than the territory which is controlled by the Russian army now, much smaller. But they didn't want to do this because the special status to be given to this small territory included the right to use the Russian language. And this in itself was considered a taboo by the Nazists who took the power in Ukraine through a coup. Then there was the right to have some local police, which is nothing unusual, and then the right to be consulted when judges and prosecutors are appointed for this particular region. By the way, this is exactly almost the same status as was promised to Kosovo Serbs in 2013, a year before, 2 years before the Minsk agreements. This community of Serbian municipalities of Kosovo. The same stuff and the same trick. Cheating on Serbia in case of a community of Serbian municipality of Kosovo, cheating on Russia in the case of the Minsk agreements. Special status for the Serbs in Kosovo, special status for Russians in Ukraine. In both cases, it was the European Union in the person of Germany and France, and also the High Representative regarding the Kosovo deal. And I am convinced that just like they admitted that they did not intend to implement the Minsk agreements, they never intended to implement the thing they promised to Serbs in Kosovo.
But the war,
this
military campaign, or whatever you call it, a war or enduring freedom operation, whatever name you may choose to call it, the bombing campaigns do not alter hearts and minds. They're the worst way to do it. In fact, they freeze people into positions, make further negotiations even more difficult. So where does this take us?
Yeah. Tell me, when this conference started? What year?
This is the eighth year now. Eighth Raisina dialogue we're having.
8th year.
Eighth, yeah.
You started in 2014 or something?
Yeah,
Have you been interested during these years what is going on in Iraq, what is going on in Afghanistan? Have you been asking the United States and NATO whether they are certain of what they're doing? When they now Scholz, Baerbock, Macron and others say this is the first time when the OSCE Helsinki Final Act is being violated. They don't remember about 1999 when Serbia was bombed, when Joe Biden, being a senator at that time, he was bragging that I, 1 year before the bombing of Serbia, I promoted this approach, and I believe that we have to bomb them out into peace. When Iraq was ruined as a state, after Colin Powell showed a vial with some powder, and then a few years later Tony Blair said, yes, it was a mistake, what to do?
No, but that is a lesson which
Wait
needs to be learned.
a second. If you believe that the United States has the right to declare a threat to its national interest any place on earth, like they did in Yugoslavia, in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, 10,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean, and they have the right to do so, and you don't ask them any questions. And Russia, not just overnight, like they did in Iraq and elsewhere, but for more than 10 years, warning them, guys, you are doing something which is going to be very bad.
But I think the
And
question
not-
has been asked.
One second. Not across the ocean, but just on our borders, on the territories where the Russians lived for centuries and centuries and centuries. So, if it is not a double standard, then